Welcome back to episode 83 of the Potter Discussion. On today's episode, we will be discussing the Quidditch World Cup and what we could have changed about it. I'm your host, Oscar. Let's do this. Welcome back to the Potter Discussion. I'm excited to be here recording because today we are talking about the Quidditch World Cup, one of the most exciting parts of the book, but not the movie. The match wasn't even in the movie, and it's just so ridiculous. So ridiculous that the whole match wasn't in the movie. They had very limited banter. They didn't go around camp. They just got there. Harry had his wonderfully written line, I love magic. And then they ducked under a light and they were cheering. Then Fudge goes, go! Then it stops. So you can imagine why we're doing this episode today. Last week's episode was about the Tri-Wizard Tournament and what we would have changed about that. But today we are going to the Quidditch World Cup. But before we get into this episode, I will make two big announcements. The first big announcement is those links are still open. The links in the show notes below if you want to submit any voice submissions or a text submission for any topics you want to hear on the show, feedback, questions, anything really. You can submit it through those forums. You might be featured on the show if you want something like that. Those links are open. It's completely free, but if you don't want to, that's completely fine. Just keep on listening because we got some good stuff coming up in this episode. I also will remind you that I am talking about the movie here. The book was fantastic, and I do not want to change anything about that. So this is completely off of the movie, and we will be changing things strictly about the movie. So let's just get into it. So the first couple of things I would really like to change about the movie is the before scenes, all the things before the actual match. And those things are so important because it really develops the characters that are involved, and it gives a lot of good backstory. There's also a lot of good banter, and that is specifically focused on Quidditch. We hear about past matches, big things that happened, and I feel like that's a really important part. And it was just left out. We had absolutely no backstory on the Quidditch World Cup. We didn't hear Ron and Bill talking about, past really exciting matches. And it was really, in the movie, just they got to the camp and they got out of the camp. That was it. There was I think Mr. Roger, that was his name, in the cottage. Mr. Weasley wasn't playing with the matches. He wasn't trying to figure out the money. It was a lot of, nothing was really there. It's like putting something in a package without putting in any foam padding. They just had the product and the box. That was it. And honestly, the product wasn't very good. So I would like a return order, but unfortunately, they don't offer returns. So the movie version of the, pre-game of the Quidditch World Cup is very, very bad. And it's because of all the reasons we've listed right now, the banter, the story before, but also by walking around the camp. So I think getting water is a really interesting part. So not the actual water itself, but that scene. So Harry, Ron, and Hermione set out from the tent a couple minutes after getting it built, and they go to the central well of their camp area, and they get some water. There's a long line, but they see so many things in that camp. And I think it's important because they see how really dedicated the fans are, and they can tell that people from the that are rooting for Bulgaria are really dedicated to Victor Crumb, the team, and if they don't win, they're going to be pretty upset. The Irish, I think the Irish most especially, were going crazy over, decorations and really putting up these extravagant things that you would never normally just say, it's a Sunday, let's just put up this, 20-foot purple bonfire for fun. So everything like that, I think, is a really important part, and really getting to know the teams and the rooting and how wizarding sports work. I think that's, of course, for the movie, but also just for in general. We could get a better understanding of how it works and how wizards, use their wizarding abilities to, have a better sport experience. And that also carries over to when Harry and Ron and Hermione were meeting all of their friends around camp. That was another big part of it, because just to see people like the Hogwarts students, the people we only see in Hogwarts, outside of the school, doing other things, I think that really contributes to the feeling of like, this is something that is widespread. This is something that is really important to wizards, and we should really, capitalize on how amazing wizard sports can be. I also would have really liked this kind of, something small, not really a big thing, but I would have liked to see how wizards, showed off to each other in the movie version. Because in the book, we do get a good description. Mr. Weasley says, wizards can't help showing off when we get together. So it would have been easy to just, put in a couple of wizards, doing some crazy things. And maybe it might have taken some extra money, some extra special effects, but it still would have been nice to at least see something that isn't, just because honestly, it is magical, and the tent is too small, and the tent inside is actually really big, but there doesn't seem to be much magic, Sure, like the port key is really the most magical thing about it, and that's it. And even the stadium is rather normal. Yes, it is absolutely gigantic, and it can hold 100,000 wizards, but it's still not that magical. I mean, there's confetti and balloons and lights, and that's it. It could be a regular, it could just be a regular football field. It could be a regular field that is nothing special at all. And I saw it and I thought, wow, like this looks like a regular sports field. Like I could watch any sport on the TV, and that's exactly what this field would look like. Yes, it was like a hole in the ground, and there was crazy architecture. That was really the only things that really set it apart. But the field itself was honestly, it was boring. It was boring, and the Wizards really had to do something. And I think they did, with the teams coming on, flying around. It was the Quidditch that makes the field special. But other than that, I feel like the field was a real letdown. Everyone was looking forward to having this big, extravagant, wow, it's like the new fancy Quidditch field, let's see what it is, and it's nothing. It's a dud. It isn't anything exciting. It isn't, this big wow that we were all expecting. I think that's a big part of the letdown of the Quidditch World Cup, and that's just something that I feel like we could really have benefited from if they kept it in. So another big part of this whole disappointment of the Quidditch World Cup were the characters. And I think most of you listening right now will know where I'm going with this. Ludo, Bagman, and Barty Crouch. They were a very large part of the book, but almost non-existent in the movie. In fact, Ludo Bagman wasn't even a character at all, and we only met Barty when the trio was running after Harry got smacked in the head. So I feel like Ludo Bagman added a sense of sportsmanship and fun and light and happiness, and that's something that I think was really contrasted well by Barty Crouch. It was even described in the book as he was rigid, he was a rule follower, Percy's kind of person. But Ludo Bagman almost couldn't offset that. He didn't exist. Ludo Bagman didn't exist, so the Quidditch World Cup was a little more serious than it needed to be. Barty Crouch didn't actually meet them in the camp, and I think that helped, but it still didn't completely erase that sense of seriousness and rigidness. Of course, Ludo Bagman does kind of shift phases almost in the book. When the Death Eaters come, he is really, really scared. The book describes him as the spring in his step is gone. His face is completely ashen, and he's just terrified. So it isn't a complete, Barty Crouch and Ludo Bagman make a really interesting story. No, it's just more the absence of Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch makes the story a little less exciting. There isn't a lot of mood change, and the camp life just is really short and quick. And I know that's kind of how it's designed to be, but I still really was disappointed when Ludo Bagman didn't even show up. He wasn't even considered to be a character. It was just a Barty Crouch, but Barty only came in after the match. And that's still something that's a little disappointing in my opinion. But we still do see, some remnants of Barty in the beginning. I think we may have had a glimpse of him when the match was about to start. But still nothing that was more of a something that would help us with the camp life. And Ludo Bagman really was a kind of beacon almost. And he was described as like giving off this aura of just boyishness and excitement for a fun Quidditch match that he gets to go to, and that's something that the movie was really lacking, the emotion of it. And it was tough to convey that, contrast of course, Ludo to Barty, but also happy when the match was won by Ireland, spoiler alert, sorry, and Ludo Bagman was celebrating, and then when the Death Eaters come. I think the whole book is all about contrast, and if that range is really small, you can't really convey the emotion you want to without having these big roadblocks like not having Ludo Bagman. So for the movie to cut Ludo Bagman, I think was not the best decision, and maybe they just couldn't find a good character, maybe the actor wasn't very great, but I still think when the Death Eaters came, it wasn't as big as it could have been, and Barty Crouch really I think the actor really did a good job, but he just didn't convey. He wasn't acting in the right way. He was like, which one of you did this? The dark marks in the sky. And even finding Winky, he was really, really angry, but that just didn't come across in the movie because we couldn't see him. We had maybe a minute of screen time with Barty Crouch, but that was it. So for Barty Crouch to not be featured and for Ludo Bagman to not even exist at all was really something that could have helped out the movie a ton, but unfortunately just didn't exist. So if I had to change one thing, honestly, it would be that Ludo Bagman was in the movie, and that would have been amazing. Unfortunately, he wasn't, but we'll just have to move on and never think of this day again. So moving right along after that beautiful music, we're talking about meeting friends around camp. And I know we briefly touched on this point in the beginning of this episode, but I do want to continue talking about it. And not the water, seeing Bulgaria and Ireland, really celebrating, but actually meeting people from Hogwarts. And it might not seem like a very important part of the story, but I feel like it really adds a sense of, excitement. Seeing friends from Hogwarts that we've only ever known in Hogwarts outside of that school, I think really conveys a message of, this is a big thing and a lot of people are here to experience it, so we should enjoy this while it lasts. And that was especially magnified with the friends around camp, which is exactly what Harry went around doing, meeting friends from school, around the camp in the book. But only in the book, not in the movie, which I thought was So, I think especially meeting Oliver Wood on camp, and that was really exciting because Oliver Wood is the Quidditch captain. He is the Quidditch captain of the Gryffindor, and I think maybe at that point he wasn't, but he still was very involved in Quidditch, and he just got signed on the Puddlemere United team. That took a while to say, but I assume he got a keeper position, so he really is doing well with Quidditch. And to be there, to have the great Oliver Wood, the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team on the Puddlemere United team, that's just really something that Oliver coming to the game is really something that I think is big. That's something that Harry seeing Oliver there is a really big thing. That Oliver would use his time to see the Quidditch World Cup. And of course you're saying that's a no-brainer. He loves Quidditch. Of course he would go. But if he's training for Puddlemere United, why would he go? But he did. He used his valuable time to do this. So I think that even goes to show that even the most busy of people who love Quidditch will sacrifice that time and that energy to go to the match. And even Harry being there. Harry, of course, he had nothing else to do, but Harry being at the Quidditch World Cup is really another contributor to the fact that he loves Quidditch, and he would go to the Quidditch World Cup even if he had to run a marathon. So having all these friends around camp showing their families, supporting their teams, and really conveying a sense of, excitement, I think really adds to the book. But we never see that in the movie, and I think it could have been magnified so much more because it is a movie. We see them. We see in the sea of camp that these few people from Hogwarts using their time and energy to go to the match. So to have the visual component of seeing these friends and Harry walking around and Ron and Hermione, I feel like it would be so much better to see that kind of thing than have nothing at all. And that's something that I feel like could have really been added to the movie that was not. And if that could have just been in there, I think it would have been so much more lively, and the air of excitement would have been there. They're clearly trying. They were clearly trying to make this whole thing about we're excited, we're ready for the match, it's the big thing, it's the big day, but we could never get that message because it was never conveyed. And these friends around camp would be the bridge from point A to point B, bringing us the excitement and showing us a window into the world of what Harry is experiencing that very moment. So after that long rant, let's just move on from this segment. So now we get to the match. And if you don't know what I'm going to be talking about now, just get ready. This is going to be a good one. So, we never saw the match. I am preparing for this segment because we are going to have a chat. Why was the Quidditch World Cup not included? Why was the Quidditch World Cup never even mentioned? We were like, there was no, I'm so excited, let's do it, boom. And then we never saw the cup. The Quidditch World Cup didn't exist. We never saw Aiden Lynch, falling victim to the Wonski feint by Victor Crumb. We never saw all these different passes, the omnioculars, all the fancy things, Ron having fun, the galleon falling from the sky, the leprechauns, the villa, everyone's, cheering in the stands and getting off and walking up to the box and seeing how high they were. We never had any of that, and we never got to experience the match. That is the two best Quidditch teams in the world, and we never got to see them. And now we're just stuck with Harry. And by the way, the Harry played, I can only imagine how the professional Quidditch players played. And even in the book, you could tell in the book how good they were. Bagman couldn't even say their names, they were going that fast. And that just goes to show you how much of a tough scene that would have been to shoot. But then it also is so disappointing to know that scene might never be shot again because of its difficulty. Because the Quidditch World Cup is such a difficult thing to capture, I don't know why they didn't try. And maybe it might have been a budget. Maybe it was they put all their special effects into the stadium, into the Death Eaters, into the tents, into the woods, into the Portkey, whatever it was. I don't know why they didn't have the Quidditch World Cup. And I'm gonna look it up right now because I need answers. Okay, I just spent way too long looking that up, and apparently we were right. Time and money. That's what was keeping the Quidditch World Cup from reaching our eyes and our ears. And we could never, ever have that back. And now that it is, apparent, I can kind of rationalize that's acceptable. That is an acceptable reason for not having the Quidditch World Cup in there. And at this point, I'm not blaming the directors and the filmmakers and the producers. Now I am just blaming the movies and the monies and the times it took to make these scenes. So the bottom line is the Quidditch World Cup was something that would have been a very necessary sacrifice. And I'm thinking about the Triwizard Tournament, that is probably more important than the Quidditch World Cup. And that is only because, I'm not saying in general, but I'm saying for the fourth movie, because Voldemort comes back. So if they were going to have to cut the Triwizard Tournament or the Quidditch World Cup, I think they made the right decision to cut the Quidditch World Cup, just because so many things happen in the Triwizard Tournament. Cedric dies, Harry learns so much, he has Gillyweed, Voldemort comes back. Just so many things happen that they could never ever cut the Quidditch World Cup. Sorry, the Triwizard Tournament. So because they cut the Quidditch World Cup, I think that was a sacrifice that was necessary. They had to make that sacrifice, and that is something that I just am so annoyed about, that they could have just spent the extra buck. That honestly, they could have started any kind of a donation site on the internet, and they probably could have raised enough money. Honestly, that is exactly what could have happened. They could have said, hey, we don't have enough money for this, do you want to give some money? And I bet thousands, maybe even millions of people would have given $1 or $2. So they definitely could have made that scene, but I don't know if it was worth it for them to cut it. I don't know if it was worth it for us to lose that experience. So for the Quidditch World Cup to be cut and for the Triwizard Tournament to be kept in, it was the right decision. I'll give them that, but it was not a good one. And that's something that I am standing by. I will forever be disappointed, and I am so sad that I will never ever see the Quidditch World Cup again. Okay, so moving right along from that very long, rambling segment into the, I said pre-match, it's not pro-match, but let's just say after the match. After the match, there was some good banter. They were talking about, favorite scenes. They're running back different plays on their omnioculars. And Fred and George were complaining about how Ludo Bagman never gave them their gold. They had goblin gold, leprechaun gold, that disappeared after 20 minutes. So it was good. Those are the good scenes. Those are the things you want to see, but we never, ever saw them. So, why? Why were those good banter scenes just never shown? All we had was Ron, saying, Crumb, he isn't a human, he's a bird of prey. And Fred and George saying, Victor, I love you, Victor, I do. I am getting way too caught up in this, but bottom line is those scenes after the match in the book were so much longer and better than the scenes after the match in the movie. And I think that's partly because there was no match in the movie, but also because there's nothing to talk about. And we didn't see anything happening, so they couldn't talk about the match. They couldn't have that cocoa. They couldn't have anything like that. They could have just talked about what we already knew about the players. I think they just harped on the Crumb being good, and we knew Crumb was good, but we didn't know that Crumb used the wonky feint, and that was a huge thing. So they couldn't include that in the movie. They couldn't say, well, this happened and it was really good, so we're going to talk about this now. No, they couldn't, because it was never included in the Quidditch World Cup. Everything stems from this not being in the Quidditch World Cup, so it couldn't be featured in the later movie. And that's really another bugging part. That's something that I really was disappointed about, because the banter afterwards is really another interesting insight into the characters that were in the story. Not specifically the book or movie, but just the general story of Harry Potter. But of course, I shouldn't say of course, I should say unfortunately, no other classmates were featured in this part, even in the book. But I do think they were talking about, what other classmates would have wanted, what other people would have done. But I also really like how they ended out that chapter with Harry imagining himself as Victor Crumb, saying, this person, and Potter. So for Harry to be thinking about that, I think it really is telling for his character that he really likes Quidditch, and he's going to continue playing Quidditch for a very long time. But that's also why they should have kept that in. There's such a big part of the Quidditch World Cup, and it's such a big part of the story, that they didn't have those few things of banter, of imagination, of thinking. They couldn't show thoughts in the movie, so they just completely cut those thoughts altogether. And that's a really tough part. Another one of those sacrifices that I think they really should not have made, but a necessary one nonetheless. And then the Death Eaters come. This is one of those scenes where if you cut a part, it won't really affect the rest of the whole production. But unfortunately, with this kind of thing, it did. And I say that in the nicest way possible, but unfortunately you can't really fix what happened. So pretty much the Death Eaters invade the camp, and they burn down the tents, and they chase everyone into the woods. Harry gets knocked out, and he's left there. And no one finds him, no one discovers him. He just lies there while the entire camp burns around him. But clothes are fine, he's fine, not burned up at all. Then just happens to wake up right as a very important and vital person to Voldemort was walking by, watches him, cast the dark mark, walks away, and then is immediately found. So there's a small bit of luck going on here, but the Death Eaters really didn't have the spotlight, and it's unfortunate because I would have really liked to see more Death Eater scenes. The Death Eaters really made the aftermath of the event really and very interesting and something you could really invest yourself in. But we never got those scenes, and unfortunately, we never will. So another really interesting part of this set of scenes was Malfoy. And Malfoy in the Woods, as I call it, is another interesting and telling part of Malfoy's character and of Lucius Malfoy. So for those who don't remember, basically how it went in the movie was they heard the Irish celebrating too much, which was the Death Eaters, and everyone runs out. The people of age and Percy run to the rescue while everyone else in the tent rushes to the woods to escape. And what do Harry, Ron, and Hermione find in the woods? Draco Malfoy. And what Malfoy says is not exactly what you would expect from someone like Malfoy to say. Basically what he says is, my dad is out there and doing things like that, and I really enjoy watching people I enjoy watching muggles suffer. So if you can't gather what Malfoy is talking about, what the Death Eaters do is they levitate the Roberts family in the air, and yeah, they do some pretty mean stuff. So for Malfoy to say that, I think that really shows his character, and maybe that he is invested in this whole idea of being a Death Eater, and he wants to please his father by being cruel to those who can't defend themselves. So it's like kicking a puppy. The puppy can't do anything about it, but you do it because you can. And that's exactly what Malfoy's doing here, which I don't think is something he should be doing. So luckily he does get himself under control later in the years, but it doesn't exactly happen just like that. So it's a little bit of a journey for Malfoy, but I think he's getting there. I'll give him that. This book was not his highest point, but 6th and 7th, I think he was really growing. So, moving right along for our last big thing that I feel like should have been in the movie, and that is Winky. Winky didn't exist. So, yeah, another Ludo Bagman situation here. Winky the house elf didn't even exist, so that means Barty Crouch Jr. wasn't under the invisibility cloak, which means the whole plot of Barty Crouch Jr. serving Voldemort in disguise wasn't really a plot point either. So this whole thing is really mind-boggling, that Harry, of course, didn't lose his wand in the 4th movie, he didn't go into the woods in the 4th movie, he didn't even see everyone in the 4th movie. So for Winky not to exist, I think, is kind of the final blow. That's the thing that really sets the book apart from the movie. And because there is no Winky, I think it's really showing that Warner Bros. Couldn't afford a lot of stuff outside of what they're already doing. And that Warner Bros., of course, very rich, a lot of power. They make great movies and stuff, but they invest a lot of things into specific areas. And that is a great strategy, and it works well for them. But it leaves out a lot of stuff, including Winky the house elf. It's very difficult to create a humanoid figure in special effects. So that's why they worked so hard on Dobby, and that's why they couldn't include Winky. But for Winky to not be in the movie, I think really sets off the whole theme of not including house elves. So, if you think about it, not a lot of house elf related things are actually in the movie. Like Spew. Spew wasn't in the movie, and Winky wasn't in the movie, and maybe those two things are connected. Winky is the reason Hermione starts Spew, because she sees Winky being so mistreated, and Mr. Crouch going, "How could you do this? How could you disappoint and embarrass our family?" Hermione was just so distraught and unbelievably duress. She just couldn't understand why someone would be so mean to a living thing. And I don't think she quite understood that that's what house elves enjoy. Well, maybe not all of them, but Winky was very committed to serving the Crouch family. And when she didn't do it well, not very happy. So I think, all in all, there were a lot of questionable removals and messy cleanups. I think that sums it up pretty well. All in all, as I have said many times before, very, very good movie. Loved it. It was very good. But it left a lot of things to be desired. Many things removed, a lot of missing gaps, very convenient plot holes. But it is a very good movie all the same. And although I am complaining a lot, there are many good things about the movie. So go ahead. Your homework is to watch the fourth movie again and notice all the things that were wrong. And once you've done that, send me a voice submission. I want to hear what you think. I want to hear what scenes you would want to have in the movie. So use those two links in the description. Again, the SpeakPipe page, the Potter Discussion SpeakPipe page, where you can send a voice submission to the show to maybe be featured. If you want to send in a topic, a question, a suggestion, anything you want, just use that SpeakPipe page. If you don't want to send in your voice, you can just go ahead and use the Google form linked down below in the same spot. But other than that, if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear on the podcast, definitely send me an email. My email is ThePotterDiscussion@gmail.com. That is ThePotterDiscussion@gmail.com. If you could just scroll down in your podcast app of choice, tap those 5 stars, or even leave a written review, that would help me out more than you could ever know, and it would help other listeners find the show. Well, as always, use information to your advantage, and I will see you later.